to Welcome to Jackie's Litter Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for a book update. So I did get all 3 books I ordered off of Thrift Books as of yesterday. I also wanted to, not only show you that order, but also show you, I don't think I've showed you the books that I got last time I went to the bookshop, because I went there the other day, and, I was kind of feeling cabin fever, so I decided to go up there, and of course, that was the day that Half Their Power was out on the side where they had the little coffee shop. So I just browsed, got my books, and paid for them, and I didn't even stay that long. But I don't remember if I showed you guys those books yet, because I don't think I got a chance to film for that, to show you those. And I'm also, of course, going to update you on how my reading is going. So let me do that first. I am reading, still reading The Cuckoo by Leo Carew, the 3rd and final book in the Under the Northern Skies trilogy. So it's kind of hard to talk about this, but something did happen that I was not expecting to happen, and it was a little weird. It was a little jarring, and it was very sudden that this event happened. I was not thinking that the author would go there, or at least wait and not do that very thing in the middle of the book. But I'm not sure if I trust that. I think what it seemed, even though there's been a time gap in the story since that event, and it seems like, yeah, that it happened. But it feels weird. It feels like that's a little too quick for something. Like, something's gonna change. I feel like it's not necessarily what we think happened is what actually happened. And also, kind of looked at the table of contents, because it does have a list of the chapter titles, and I'm not sure if, from the titles of a later chapter, I'm wondering, like I said, if things are not what they seem. But yeah, I'm also want to know, why did people not like this? I mean, people are entitled to their opinion, but I kind of want to understand what made them have the, part of me wants to understand what, why they have the opinion that they do. Now, and I think I would be okay reading, because there's sometimes when people have different opinions of mine that I'm a little like, I don't agree with you, how could you think that way? And I get a little, irrational about it, like, why? You're not, you're wrong kind of responses. Even though their opinions are, it's okay for them to have different opinions than me, and books, how you feel about a book or a movie or a TV show is objective, in this, or with songs too, are not objective, subjective. But there's times when I care so much about something that I'm like, I get, I'll get defensive. And I think that's a reason for a lot of people. When people get mad at each other for having different opinions, they care so much about that thing that it's like, how dare you have that opinion? What's wrong with you? But I always try to give myself time to be like, okay, it's okay that they have different opinions. It's not a criticism of me. And, it's not going to change how I feel about the book. And, but in this case, I think it won't bother me as much. I can just shrug it off, because I'm not, like, in love with this book or anything. Like, I'm enjoying it, and I am curious why people think this is the worst book in the trilogy. Because so far, I'm still loving it. I mean, like I said, it was a little weird, that thing that happened in the middle of the book. But, it's okay. I'm going with it. Like, I'm like, and, if I'm wrong, and assuming that it's going to be revealed that maybe what happened isn't what happened, it's not like, how could Leo Carew do this? I mean, I don't feel that way about it. I'm trying to figure it all out as I go along, and wondering, like, is that what people think this is the worst book ever, or are there other things? I also really struggle when people criticize the writing, because I'm reading something and I'm like, I don't see the problem with the writing, but then I end up feeling stupid, if people are like, the writing is terrible. I mean, there's sometimes where, I mean, there are times when, of course, it's obvious. But again, everyone has different taste in writing also, so. And I do know, and it's not like I don't know the difference between, like, really beautiful, elegant writing. Like, there is a difference between something like Brandon Sanderson or this author versus, like, Tolkien or C.S. Lewis. Although I haven't actually read any C.S. Lewis. But that kind of flowing, poetic writing style, and then, of course, Tolkien's also very descriptive and detailed, and, like, he describes everything like it's a painting or something, or like a painting, or like, while there are some authors like Brandon Sanderson or Leo Carew who just basically describe what you see, but they don't go into details. It's not poetic. It's just very blunt, and excuse me, and it's done in a way that kind of explains what's going on so that you can picture it, but it doesn't go into this poetic detail. Just enough for you to be able to picture the scene and stuff, and get into the story. So I'm pretty good into, pretty halfway. And what is nice is that, not that I want to ever rush my reading experiences, but as I've said before, I appreciate when authors do shorter chapters, and because it makes you, and it makes you feel like you've read a lot, and it can be very stressful for me when I'm reading those bigger books, and then I think I read a lot, but then it's only like this much. But anyway, so I can't really talk a lot about this, because unless I know for a fact you guys have read the first 2 books. And I can't know if every person who's subscribed to my channel has read the trilogy. As I said before, if you are a fan of Bernard Cornwell, I think you might like this. And I read a little bit about the author in the back. They have a little description of the author in the back, or sometimes even in the front. It's funny. The author actually wrote The Wolf, the first book, when he was camping out in the Arctic. I think this was it. Let me look at the authors, about the author. No, it's after this. Where is it? Where does it say it? Hang on, I can't. Okay, so that's acknowledgements. Dang it! Oh wait, no. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to find that page. Okay, meet the author. Leo Carew is a graduate of biology. Okay, Yep, he spent a year. He spent a year living in a tent in the high Arctic. It was here that he started writing The Wolf. So I think that's cool. He spent a year in the Arctic and wrote his first book in this trilogy. That is amazing that he did that. I mean, considering that environment. And the isolation. Not that, I mean, I don't know if he was, well, I guess he would have been isolated. He was probably isolated in living in a tent. Like, I guess it was a good distraction. And, it's a way to fight the isolation and not go insane, is focus on writing a book. And, like, the characters are your friends. Which, granted, I don't know if that could make you crazy, but yeah, so I'm still loving this. I don't understand why people think this is the worst book in the trilogy, but I would be curious to find out why, basically. And then I am started reading The Guns of August, The Outbreak of World War I, by Barbara W. Tuchman. This was a Jen Jakinski. I still don't know how to say her last name. But originally her channel name was Jen Insert Literary Pun. She did a dual review of this one and another book that I will actually have to show you guys. And she kind of compared the 2 books, which one maybe she felt like was to a better job on each of the important aspects of World War I. And luckily for me, if there's stuff that I need to talk to someone about that I don't understand, then I can go to my dad because he's a history person. He's the reason why I love history so much. And he knows a lot about this subject. Although he's more of a American Revolution guy, but he said he would be able to help me with this book. He unfortunately he can't help me with the medieval history stuff, I don't think. Um but I'm definitely intrigued by this. So far, like, this first section is talking about going through each of the main countries that are part of this war. Like, so we get the German perspective, we get the British, the French perspective, and the Russian perspective. Each of the first handful of chapters covers what each country is doing at the beginning of the war. At the beginning of the year, right before 1914. And their motivations and how they prepared for war. Like, the German Kaiser felt he was underappreciated by the rest of the country. Edward VII just died, and right, it talks about. I'm currently reading the last chapter in the first part is on Russia, and it sounds like they had the biggest army. And I also learned that one of the German generals, he was a big fan of Hannibal, the guy who attacked Carthage. He was a fan of his methods of attack. So General Schifflin, I don't know if I'm saying his name right. His plan was to use Hannibal's approach to attacking a country, and they're all going to go through. And the plan is to go through Belgium, while the Russians in England and France want to go through. Go through Berlin and attack the Germans. And it's debatable whose side Russia is on. Because, like I said, I think both sides want the Russian army because they have the biggest army. Now, I don't know much about this particular war, but they mention the war between the Japanese and Russians, and I guess the Japanese kicked the Russians' ass. And so they're trying to make up for that failure. I don't know about that war, so maybe I'll have to research that war at some point. But anyway, but yeah, it's kind of interesting learning about the relationships between these countries and France and England's team up. How France didn't have the best army record, and I'm guessing that's why they teamed up with England, because they had the smallest army, and they needed England to protect them from the Germans. But it's hard to. It's a lot of information that's hard to follow along because I don't understand everything. But people say you don't have to understand everything. Just read it, and of course maybe that's more for like reading like big fiction books, but especially or classics. But there's always the whole rereading books, and it does help having someone that knows the subject just as well to talk to, so they can kind of explain what you've read. Like, I think it's a lot harder for me if I don't have anyone to talk to about it afterwards, because sometimes also just talking to someone, I can learn better and remember things better if I actually verbally talk to someone, which is also why I will read nonfiction out loud, because then I'm hoping that will, if I hear myself read it, I feel like that could, help me remember information and stuff. I've even earlier this morning, I thought about making flashcards for some facts, like you do in school, like elementary school, where you're trying to memorize things, you make flashcards to study. And I do have some flashcards. They're just the really big ones, but I don't know. I might be. I mean, I say I like the idea of doing that, but then I get lazy and end up not doing it because I'm like, oh, I'm not getting a grade or anything. This is just for me. So I'm like, oh, I forget about it later. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna get in trouble if I don't do that. But I would like to, you know. But I think that might help. You know. So, and this is easy to read. I mean, and again, this also has short chapters. But it's a lot. This is easier to read even with even if you're not a military, you don't have an interest in military. It's, like I said, not a super hard read. So that's what I'm currently reading. I'm also rewatching Bridgerton starting from season 1 because I finished season 4 and I loved it. I enjoyed it very much. And I did not realize until I heard other people and read about it on the internet, there was a bonus scene at the end, like halfway through the credits. So I had to go fast forward, rewatch the last episode. I mean, I didn't even rewatch the last episode. I just fast forwarded through the last episode and watched it. And now I'm starting from the beginning and will, watch the whole series all over again. But it's really fun because I know what's gonna happen, so it's not as nerve wracking. I'm still yelling at the screen at the characters for being dumb, and not communicating. But it's like, oh, don't worry, or I'm also thinking if I could talk to the characters, like, oh, just you wait, it will be your turn soon enough, or something like that. And I don't know who wants to see. I mean, I kind of want Eloise seasons to be the 5th season, but I don't know. If it's Francesca's season 5, then that would be great. I'd still be happy either way. But part of me kind of wants to see Eloise's season next. And see where she goes. Although someone on Instagram did a quick video of an interesting idea of, like, maybe her arc for season 5, Eloise's arc, if it's not, her book season, then maybe there could be a season where she's kind of playing matchmaker like Emma in Jane Austen's Emma. And that's the book that in season, I think it's season, I don't know if it's season 3 or 2, where she's reading Emma. But yeah, I want to say it was season 3. But anyway, like, she could follow in Emma's footsteps and play matchmaker because she's starting to come around to the idea of love and marriage, and it's not a trap for women. And I mean, it can be, but in their world, it's like their mom wants them to find love and wants them to have it both ways. And find romance in their marriage and everything. And she's a lot of positive examples where it does work out, even if it's just in her family. Maybe she knows that, yeah, it might not work, and you might end up in a bad marriage. But in her case, she's, in the case of her family, all of them have been very lucky. So I think she's coming around to it she's starting to come around to the idea of it, and that there could be good marriages, and it's not always a trap, at least in their world, like I said. So I would be good with that if her season was not season 5, and they did a storyline where she was playing matchmaker, and then eventually she crosses paths with Sir Philip, who's supposed to be her love interest, like in the book anyway. And I think people, because they don't entirely follow the books anymore, like they stop following the books, I think people are kind of hoping that they won't follow the book with Eloise's season. And I know there are a lot of people who find Eloise's book the worst book in the series. So, I don't know though. I'm never going to read the book, so it doesn't matter to me. The only thing but anyway. So, I did that, and I'm rewatching the whole show from the beginning. And, So that's another thing. And then, of course, I'm listening to podcasts like I did to this morning's medieval podcast, Gone Medieval podcast episode was they're talking about the Scottish queens. Although they don't mention Mary Queen of Scots, which is kind of hoping that they might talk about her in the book that the author's book that was in the episode, but they only focused on some earlier Scottish queens. And I'm back to listening to my book podcast. I think it was they did one of the podcast. I think the Well Read podcast. I think they were the ones who did book pairings, which I thought was a cool idea. It was recommended by a subscriber to their channel or their podcast. Recommended pairing books together, like not just read-alikes, but books that explore similar themes, and would really reading them together would really show the books would be in conversations with each other. Like the examples, the person who suggested the topic said like Jane Eyre and Wide Sargasso Sea. And if you've read Jane Eyre and it is about, if you've read Jane Eyre, Wide Sargasso Sea is about a secondary character in Jane Eyre. And then the other example the person gave for the suggestion was Pride and Prejudice and Bridget Jones's Diary, which, yes, it was a book first. So I thought that was a really cool idea, and I liked, I didn't know all the examples that they did in the episode, they mentioned in the episode, but I do agree, I think that would be hard to come up with, because, it's because you really gotta make sure the books you pair together, like, they meld well together. They, they complement each other a little bit. And sometimes you don't always read you don't necessarily read, I don't always read the book that, from what I know about the book, it would seem like it would go well with that book, but if I haven't read the book, even if it sounds like from the surface description, I'm like, can I really pair those together? Because I don't know if they pair well together. I don't know if that makes any sense. And I'm trying to, the other topic was, in reading classes, was their episode that I listened to was the one on queer norm books. That was one of their reading challenges for this year, where you pick books where being queer as an LGBTQ person is considered normal, and it's not like a bad thing, and people in the subject, it's just part of the story, and part of the love story, in that it's not just about like bigotry and people's prejudice against people that are on that spectrum, on the queer spectrum. So they gave some examples of that, and then and they actually did talk about something that's always, I've kind of always had a problem with, although they didn't talk a lot about it, and it was more because of it was getting books from the library and counterbalancing getting library books and reading those, and then the books you own personally that you've already spent money on. But this person was also focusing more on the person that sent the email asking the question. It was more about using Libby, which I do use. And with Libby, I don't have a problem because I don't have to physically. With Libby, I'm just listening to audiobooks, so I only listen to them when I can. So it's a little easier, but when I get a physical book, then yeah, that's when I struggle. And that's why I've, stopped using the library, because I'm like, I gotta read the books I purchased and spent money on that I already own for the library books, because when I get library books, I prioritize those. And so they talked about it, but like I said, they were talking about Libby. And I'm more worried about borrowing physical books from the library and prioritizing those, but then neglecting my own personal books that I've spent money on that I bought. So it's kind of talking about the same thing, but kind of not. Still a good episode, though. And, So now let's show you, let me haul my books for you guys. So these are the books I got from the Outpost that I don't know if I showed them to you guys. So I apologize if I already have showed you. First, we have the nonfiction book I got, which is Last Call, The Rise and Fall of Prohibition. So, as you know, I'm kind of obviously sharing Guns of August. I'm kind of on a World War I kick. So I also got some books that are post-World War I. Kind of interested in that. I mean, I've always kind of been interested in the 20s, the 1920s. So in that time, alcohol was prohibited, and but people were secretly having like hangout places, secret underground clubs where you could drink alcohol, like speakeasies, basically. And there's actually a Charmed episode from the old show where it takes place at a speakeasy. They have or the Hollowell Manor was turned into a speakeasy because they did it was Phoebe's past life was haunting her, and she was from the 1920s. This version of herself. So Phoebe goes back in time through a spell to 1920s, and it turns out that they owned she and her cousins, her Hollowell cousins, owned a speakeasy, which that's one of my favorite episodes of the earlier seasons. But yeah, so I know a little bit about this, but not a lot. There's probably stuff I don't know, but I'm gonna read the back. Last Call is Daniel Onkarat's best-selling and brilliant history of America's puzzling era, when the U.S. Constitution was amended to restrict one of America's favorite pastimes, drinking alcoholic beverages. Writing with both wit and historical acuity, Onkarat reveals how Prohibition marked a confluence of diverse forces, the growing power of the women's suffrage movement. Oh, that's not another thing that was going on. The second women's movement, because I think there was another one before it, which allied itself with the anti-liquor campaign, the fear of small-town Protestants that were losing their country to immigrants, the anti-German sentiment stoked by World War I, and other factors ranging from the rise of automobiles to the advent of income tax. Through it all, Americans kept drinking, going to remarkable lengths to smuggle, sell, and conceal and connivingly imbibe their favorite intoxicants. Last Call's rich narrative runs through smoky Manhattan speakeasies where relations between the sexes were changed forever. California vineyards, busily producing sacramental wine, New England fishing communities that switched to more lucrative rum running, and the halls of Congress where politicians who had voted for Prohibition drink openly and without apology. Of course, politicians are being hypocrites. How shocking. Okay, Last Call is peopled with vivid characters of an astonishing variety, including Susan B. Anthony, Billy Sunday, bootlegger Sam Brofman, Pierre S. DuPont, Mayor Lansky, and the incredible, if not long forgotten, federal official Mabel Walker Willebrandt, the most powerful woman in the country at the time. So this is going to be fun to read. So this is a book that I mentioned that I was thinking about getting last time, the visit before this previous one. And then it's Fallen Skies by Philippa Gregory. And this takes place post World War I also, as you can tell by the flapper in the beginning, which I did not know that Philippa Gregory wrote. I mean, I knew she tackled other time periods, but I didn't know that she tackled this, the 20th century. Takes World War II. Now back in print from New York Times bestselling author Philippa Gregory, Fallen Skies takes readers to post-World War I England in a suspenseful story about the marriage of a wealthy war hero and an aspiring singer he barely knows. Lily Valance is determined to forget the horrors of the war by throwing herself into the decadent pleasure of the 1920s, pursuing her career as a music hall singer. When she meets Captain Stephen Winters, a decorated veteran, She's immediately drawn to his wealth and status, and Stephen, burdened by his guilt over surviving the Flanders battlefields, where so many soldiers perished, sees the possibility of forgetting his anguish in Lily, but his family does not approve. Okay, I'm not gonna read that second paragraph. So this should be fun. I used to love these kind of, these 1920s flapper stories. And I think I might have cosplayed that once, or, oh wait, no, I remember Terry and I were talking about doing that one time. Before COVID broke out last time we did a convention, we were gonna do that for the next convention, but then COVID broke out. And the convention was canceled. And I did wear that costume for Halloween. Although it was kind of more Downton Abbey than Flapper. But, unfortunately, I did not look good in it, though. The way I was, I have a picture of myself, and I was not. So, but anyway. So, I'm gonna, read. So, this should be really fun. And it'll be kind of fun to read a different time period than. But I would, I'm definitely would try. If I ended up liking her writing, I mean, I did like The Constant Princess and The Other Bowling Girl. I mean, wait, no, I didn't read The Other Bowling Girl. The Constant Princess is the only one I read by her. And I did like it. I mean, I only vaguely remember, but. Okay, and so the last book is, I didn't sure if this was a nonfiction or not. They had it near the vault. But the way, I don't know if this is a fiction or nonfiction. It doesn't, I can't, I'm trying to find the. I don't know if this is fiction or nonfiction. Well, it says the list of the author's historical novels. So I have another book by this author. Where's that? Well, okay. Sorry, I'm just kind of. Dang it! Where is it? I'm trying to look for the list, because they have a list of authors of there. Nope. Okay, where is it? I mean, I just literally saw. Okay, here it is. Okay, so I don't know. I think it's fiction, but it was in the nonfiction section at the time, so I don't know. But maybe someone assumed it was nonfiction. But this is, When Christ and his Saints Slept. The story of Henry I's courageous daughter, Maud, who would become the mother of kings. So I don't know if they mean Matilda. But, let me read the back. Oh, this is by Sharon K. Penman, which I've had books by her before. I think my book, her take on a fictional take on King Henry III, on Richard III, not Henry, Richard III. I think that's her. And then I did at one point have a book on another historical figure. And, but I ended up, at the time, I wasn't as interested, so I ended up letting the book go. It might have been Richard the Lionheart. But I'm going to read the back of this. A.D. 1135, as church bells toll for the death of England's King Henry I, his barons faced the unwelcome prospect of being ruled by a woman. Henry's beautiful daughter Maud, Countess of Anjou, but before Maud can claim her throne, her cousin Stephen... Yeah, I think this is supposed to be Matilda. Her cousin Stephen seizes it. In their long and bitter struggle, all of England will bleed and burn. Yeah, okay, so it says Sharon K. Penman's splendid novel. So, I mean, I don't even know if she writes history books, like nonfiction or not, but there's that. Well, I'm excited to read that. Because I'm trying to get other authors besides Alison Weir and Philippa Gregory on this time period. Because I'm slowly collecting, which I do have quite a few now, thankfully. Okay, now let's see what books I got in the mail from Thrift Books. Okay, so first we have, this is my only nonfiction from this order, and that is The Kingmaker's Daughter. So, now the Kingmaker is, Warwick. So, but I don't know if it's, because that's the only person I know that is nicknamed the Kingmaker. But let's see. Well, the top little blurb says, if you are going to be Queen of England, he won't let you fall. Oh, this is a quote from the book. Isabel said shrewdly, if you are going to be Queen of England, he will love you and serve you every moment of the day. You've always been his pet. You should be glad that now you are at the center of his ambition. Although I'm sure it's said in a more petty, vindictive kind of way. But, Anne Neville and her sister Isabel are daughters of the most powerful magnate in 15th century England, the Earl of Warwick. Okay, yeah, it's Warwick. Okay. The Kingmaker. Born with royal blood in their veins, widowed at 14, fatherless, stripped of her inheritance, and with her mother locked in sanctuary, and Isabel a vengeful enemy, Anne faces the world alone. But fortune's wheel is always turning. Plotting her escape from her sister's house, she finds herself a husband in the handsome young Duke of Gloucester, and marries without permission. Danger follows her, and she finds she's a mortal enemy in the most beautiful Queen of England. Anne must protect herself, and her precious only son, from the treacherous royal court of her deadly royal rival, and even from driving the ambition of her husband. Okay, so she's the wife of Richard III. So it would be good to pair this one with the Richard III biography. This would be a good pairing. But, okay, so that's the only fiction book I got from that order. So, the other two books are... Oh, damn it. Okay. Sorry, my stupid light thing went out. Okay, so... Oh. Okay, I don't know... Sorry about that. Let's see if it... Okay, there it goes. What? Why does it keep doing that? I do not know why. Okay. Is it... Damn it. Okay. Okay, well, I'll fix... Okay, wait. Okay, there, the light is... Let's see. Okay, there it goes. Sorry about that. My stupid ring light was acting funny again, like it did last time. So, this is the other book that Jen mentioned, that, The Sleepwalkers, How Europe Went to War in 1914 by Christopher Clark. So, this is actually, my dad explained to me that probably the reason why World War II is talked about more is because it involved the whole world, not just Europe, as World War I did. World War I was focused on the European powers of that continent, while World War II was not just Europe, but also Asia. So Japan was the big powerhouse in Asia. But this one, according from what Jen said, she feels like this one in her opinion, does a better job at covering everything. But Guns of August is easier to read, and it sounds like it's still a good book. And I mean, like I said, I'm liking it so far. So that's why I wanted to get both. In the end, I wanted to immediately, right away after I got that one, and refreshing my memory, Jen's review, I was like, oh crap, let me get this one too, so I can cover all my bases. So I'm working on this one, as you guys know, and then I'm gonna read this one. But yeah, she shared some good quotes and stuff in her review for her talking about these books. So, on the morning of June 28th, 1914, when the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie Kocek arrived at Sarajevo railway station, Europe was at peace. 37 days later, it was at war. The conflict that resulted would kill more than 50 million people, destroy 3 empires, and permanently alter world history. The Sleepwalkers reveals in gripping detail how this crisis unfolded, drawing on fresh sources. It traces the paths to war in a minute-by-minute action-packed narrative that cuts between the key decision centers in Vienna, Berlin, St. Petersburg, Paris, London, and Belgrade. Distinguished historian Christopher Clark examines the decades of history that informed the events of 1914 and details the mutual misunderstandings and unintended signals that drove the crisis forward in a few short weeks. He reveals Europe racked by chronic problems, a fractured world of instability and militancy that was fatefully saddled with conspicuously ineffectual set of political leaders. These rulers prided themselves on their modernity and the rationalism, stumbled through crisis after crisis, and finally convinced themselves that war was the only answer. So this is going to be really great. I'm so glad to have both these books so I can learn more about World War One. Because I've really always been intrigued by World War One, because it's not that hard to find World War Two books. And I kind of would like the idea of writing like a story, World War One story, fiction. Or even the idea of turning it into like a fantasy story. Which I know a lot of people, there are some, like, I don't remember who it was, but someone I was either, watching on YouTube or listening to on YouTube, listening to on a podcast, talk to how when it comes to that they can't help but, when someone writes historical, I think it was a YouTube booktuber that said this, how, watching, for them, they can't get into like fantasy and that fantasy and historical fiction merged together, because they would rather you write about, like, they're thinking, well, just write a history, like a historical story. You don't need, like, instead of writing a fantasy / historical story, like, just if you want to write about that event, you don't need to mix in some fantasy elements. But actually, so that kind of made me laugh, because I was just thinking how I'm completely opposite. I love stories where they take history and put some fantasy element to it, especially if it's a time period in history or historical event where you don't normally mix fantasy in that time in history. Like, there are certain historical stories where it's people often do like a mix of history, or have the like have a fantasy element where there's magic in the story. Like, there's certain time periods where it's common, like often I think medieval, because of the story of King Arthur and Merlin, that it makes sense that a lot of fantasy stories and now I think I'm seeing that more and more, where other time periods have like a fantasy element where there's, magical creatures, or like, there's witches and stuff like that, you know, and not just during the Puritan times, but in other time. I just think that's kind of fun to see time periods in history where they normally wouldn't have magic. They wouldn't include a fantasy story that has magic. Okay, so now let's show you the last book I have to show you guys is a World War II story, nonfiction. Actually, it's not. I don't think it's just World War II. I think. Well, I don't know. Well, let me have to. I don't know if this is going to cover. Okay, so in our image, America's empire in the Philippines. The best history of America's 9-decade relationship with the Philippines. Excellent. So that's a blurb from a quote from the Washington Post. So of course, as you guys know, I am a quarter Filipino. My mom's half, my uncles are half. So my grandma is full-on Filipino, but she is married to an American man, or was. Sadly, my grandfather passed away a few years ago. And the last year or so, I've been a lot more interested in the history of the Philippines. And I mean, I wish I could learn the language. And I know, like Terry said, oh, why don't you put on your wish list beginner books so you can learn the language and stuff like that. And with, but I came thinking about what, my mom said, which is that, there's not much of a point to that because you won't be using that language. You won't be, using the language that often. Like, yes, my grandmother is full on Filipino, but it's not like I see her every day. And I'm not living in the Philippines, and if you don't practice, then you're gonna forget. So, part of me is like, maybe it's a waste of time, and another part of me kind of still wants to learn it, but then I feel like silly if I ask for. But anyway, I mean, I know a lot of guys will probably say, "Oh, you should do it. It's something that you want to do. If you want to learn it, learn it." And I think a lot of people would tell me that, but like I said, unless I'm going to use it on a regular basis, and honestly, I probably wouldn't. So, but anyway, so let me read the back. Stanley Carnell won the Pulitzer Prize for this account of America's imperial experience in the Philippines. In a swiftly placed and brilliantly vivid narrative, Carnell focus on the relationship that has existed between the two nations since the United States acquired the country from Spain. Oh, okay, so right, because I thought we were only involved in them during World War II when Japan showed up. But it says acquired the country from Spain in 1898, examining how we have sought to remake the Philippines in our image. An experiment marked from the outset by blundering ignorance and mutual misunderstanding. But yeah, I've always wanted to learn about that history and, and just dive deep into that and the Philippines' relationship with Americans and how we have a habit of forcing ourselves onto these other countries. But yeah, it's so funny. It's so funny because like my grandma was talking about how she was, how she feels like because I read so much, I will know more than she does about the Philippines. And she's from the country. But I mean, of course, she hasn't been there in a long time. Hasn't been back there in years. Which makes it kind of sad, like, that she hasn't been able to go back. I mean, and, who knows how much longer she's going to be with us, which is, depressing to think about, but, she's in her 80s, and unfortunately, she's very weak, and it kind of makes me sad that she might never be able to go back. And, of course, my grandfather is buried here, so she's going to want to be next to him. I mean, it would be kind of nice for her if they actually cremated her, and then some of her ashes were brought back to the Philippines. That'd been kind of nice, but I don't know how. Not that I want to think about that, but anyway, it just kind of makes me sad that she'll never. I mean, I wonder if she's always thought about going back. I mean, I think she has gone back, of course, but anyway, and of course, my mom spent part of her life, like, she went to high school in the Philippines. Her and my dad did. But that's in our image. So it would definitely be interesting to read about their relationship with Americans and how that turned out for the Philippines. But so yeah. Okay, so that is my update for you guys. I hope you enjoyed hearing what I had to say. Are you familiar with any of the books I just showed you, that I just hauled, or even, the books I'm currently reading, like, The Guns of August, or have you checked out Under the Northern Sky trilogy yet? I'm also, as you can see, like, I'm trying to annotate more. And there were some quotes. There was a quote in here that I found that I really liked. Let me go ahead and... Well, actually, I can't. I don't think I can show it to you guys. Yeah, I guess I can't really show you the quote because it might spoil something. So, but it's a quote that I, really liked. So, about a character. But anyway... So that's what's going on with my reading. I'd love to know what you are currently reading right now. Feel free to share in the comments. And I hope you are doing well and having a good start to a new month, which is March. So I will talk to you guys later. All right, bye.